Hey folks, and welcome to week number 9. Alright, so, this is kind of broken into two chunks. The first chunk is about breaking down your big question into smaller sections, and then the second part is starting the research. I'm going to recommend, instead of waiting until, the last minute, not that any of you would ever do that, to submit your homework, to get your research questions, and we'll talk about those in just a second, in as soon as possible, because I can give you feedback, everything looks good, you can start doing research early in the week, okay? It'll just give you more time. So, let's go ahead and go through this. So the first chunk here is called Breaking Down the Big Question. There's a template and there's a sample. I'm going to go into the sample here. We got 2 samples today. Okay, so everyone should have a central research question, and that central research question is, ultimately, is this article accurate or not? So, that might be if your article's claims, I don't know, that apple cider vinegar will help you lose 5 pounds of weight a week. That's your central research question. Will apple cider vinegar do this? Okay, so this main research question, in red here, is the question, are the risks and adverse side effects associated with using marijuana to treat depression and anxiety greater than the risks and adverse side effects associated with using SSRIs? This was a claim that was made on Facebook that a student went and investigated. So that's your central research question. And then it gets broken down into smaller chunks. Okay? If you can Google this question and find an answer, there's no debate over it. No one says, no, this is actually the true, that, or that's actually true. We don't need to do research on it. Okay? We talked last week about the fact that research questions, should really guide our process here. Rather than, oh, this is what I want to write, and then go find evidence to support that, it's really to ask the question, try to find out something new. So, given that, we want to start with that central research question, and because you shouldn't be able to Google that central research question and find the answer that everyone agrees upon, we want to break that down into smaller chunks. So you can see how this student did this. How do antidepressants work? How do anxiety medications work? How common are the adverse side effects? How does depression affect the brain? Etc., etc., etc. Okay? Here's another sample that a student did. She found a claim that the gender wage gap was a result of sex discrimination, i.e., women, we always hear that 72 cents on the dollar, women make 72 cents on the dollar, for every dollar a man makes. That's a result of sex discrimination, so she's trying to investigate this, okay? Pay attention to the video on, how to break the big question down. It'll give you a little bit more detail, but that's the first part of what we're doing today, is trying to get your research questions identified, and then the smaller chunks broken down. All of that goes into this template here, and again, there are 2 samples right here, and it gets submitted here. Again, the earlier you turn it in, the sooner I can give you feedback, the sooner you can start doing research, which is the second half of this week's activities. So, there's a video on the research process, which just sort of tells you what we're focusing on right now. There'll be a second part of this when we hit essay 4 and how what we're looking at has changed, okay? There's a welcome video from the librarian, Professor Montaner, who is one of the librarians at Prairie State and will be working with our class. You can email him. You can also, if you want, set up an appointment with him. You're not required to for class, but if you want some help with doing the research, set up an appointment with him. You can meet with him or do a phone conference with him. He'll be glad to work with you there. And then there's a video on how to use OneSearch, which Professor Montaner put together, which is the front end of our library databases, okay, to find research, okay? So that's the 2 things this week. What we want you to do first, break your research question down into smaller chunks, get some feedback on that from me, and then, once that happens, start doing research, such that you can, and then we'll spend some of next week researching as well, and I'll be collecting some check-ins from you next week about how you're doing in the research process, okay? If you have any questions along the way, don't hesitate to let me know.